Hi everyone. So I did a version of a new moon in Gemini video this morning, a half an hour after the new moon in Gemini, because as I said to you yesterday, I was going to try and do it later on in the day, but I actually decided I would do it sooner. Irrespective, I did it, and I was still very conflicted about what I was saying and how to integrate the energies at work, and I completed it, didn't upload it, but it got saved on YouTube. You guys have not seen it because I didn't process it. But then when I was taking care of some other chores, I realized I got the answer that I was looking for. Here's what we know so far. We know that we have a new moon in Gemini earlier this morning, 10:37 a.m. or so Pacific time on today, May the 22nd. I'll put the exact time after I'm done processing the video. We know that there are 3 eclipses that are coming up. One in the sign of Sagittarius on June the 5th, and then one on June the 21st in the sign of Cancer, and one on July the 4th in the sign of Capricorn. And then we have another new moon in Cancer on July the 20th. I've already established that this is a handoff of eclipses from the Cancer Capricorn, which is the last 2 eclipses of the ones I just talked about, to Gemini Sagittarius. And the Sagittarius eclipse on June the 4th is the first of the Sagittarius Gemini eclipses. For all intents and purposes, even though the new moon that happened today is not an eclipse, you can just about, it's almost there, partly because of the heavy-hitting combination, too strong a word, partly because of the combination of planets that are in Gemini right now. We've got, and the configuration that you can't make up, that you can't ignore. I kept looking at the new moon chart and kept looking for positive reinforcement of positive aspects to this new moon, and they just weren't there. And it was tough because, I was just like, really, there's no silver lining? And it is, and what I got back was that it's not a question of silver lining, it is a time of conflict. At least that's what the chart was very clearly saying. And sometimes when you're looking at charts, the conflict is off by degrees in a way that it's kind of there, but it isn't exact. But with this new moon, certain things are very much imprinted. As we've said so far, there are Mercury and Venus and the Sun and the Moon in Gemini, and Mars and Neptune in Pisces. The Sun and the Moon in Gemini that form the new moon are at 2 degrees of Gemini. Mars is at 6 degrees of Pisces. So this is a tight square. So the new moon squares Mars, the god of the planet of war, of action, of drive, of goals. Okay? And then Venus and Mercury, a retrograde Venus and Mercury being the ruler of Gemini and therefore the ruler of this new moon, are pretty much in an exact square with Neptune, the ruler of Pisces, around the time of the new moon. And I'm looking at this going, again, one of the wonders of astrology and studying it and practicing it is that you can't make up certain things. Now, if I were to look at eclipse season, I would sort of break it up into 3 acts. One of them got done just before this new moon. And just before the new moon happened, the Sun and the Moon trined Saturn. And there may have been, just before this new moon, a feeling of, how a conductor does, it's like the first act is over, and a pause, a gathering of resources, a connection to seriousness and stability. And then when I look at this new moon, I think, okay, whatever it was that was the turmoil or the start of the Venus retrograde and Mercury entering Gemini energy that has been, Venus entered Gemini in the beginning of April, and April the 4th was the 2-month, April the 5th was the 2-month preversary of the June 5th eclipse. So these energies have been at work and gathering momentum since April the 5th. Venus came into Gemini then, and our relationship and financial realities became much more connected and communication oriented. With the April 21st or so new moon, 22nd new moon in Taurus conjunct Uranus, technology started to play an even larger role, and innovation in terms of the connection with people. And by the middle of May, Venus had turned retrograde, and we started this process of reevaluating especially our finances and our relationships, and starting to reevaluate them in the light of the tremendous forward movement we had experienced in April, even though we were all under lockdown. What is remarkable looking back at this lockdown period is how much has actually happened, either in terms of new portals or new opportunities somehow showing up mysteriously, or for some other people, really kind of significant developments that are eclipsy. Before we get to gloom and doom about life, let us just reflect on the fact that this whole COVID episode has been experienced by all of us in so many different ways. For some people, tragic. For some people, burdensome. For some people, challenging. For some people, strangely restful. For some people, giving and allowing time for reflection. For some people, it's just, even though we've been under lockdown or quarantine or shutdown, it's been really kind of remarkable. The other thing with the Venus retrograde is, and the eclipse is underway, there is a certain amount of turmoil at work. Now, with the eclipses, the turmoil does not have to be negative. I know that my last few videos have had a more serious or challenged tone to them, but I really think it important right now to emphasize that eclipses can bring positive, sometimes sudden but positive events that are significant, offers, things coming to a culmination in a good way, you being pushed into the limelight in some way, some sort of positive career, relationship oriented stuff as well, so it's not all bad. And if you have Venus retrograde in your birth chart, I would encourage you to think about whether the Venus retrograde, how it is affecting your relationships and money. Do you feel more in sync, or are you in a space of reevaluation? I've also mentioned to you guys that the space of reevaluation should be done through the lens of what it is that you value and where it is that you want to go. And then the question becomes, how does your financial life, particularly your financial spending and outlay, support where you want to go? Is it supporting it, or is it draining it in some way? And similarly, from a relationship perspective, and with Venus retrograde, as we've discussed before, past relationships come up for review. Exes can show up, interestingly, for review. And it's a time to reevaluate. It isn't a time to make decisions. The time to make decisions will come after the 25th of June or so. And at that point, you can decide what you want to do, whether you want to break up, where you want to go. But I'm certainly not encouraging you to go back to whatever was before the reevaluation. Okay? So just because Venus goes retrograde doesn't mean that everything that is being uncovered or dealt with through the reevaluation, either financially or relationship-wise or creatively or artistically, things that are impeding natural flow and harmony. And with Mercury in Gemini, in the past 2.5 weeks, really thinking communication has played a big role in being a catalyst in Act 1 in this reevaluation process. Well, we may have thought that before this new moon, because the 24 hours, 48 hours before a new moon tends to create a bit of a pause, or creates a purging or a reflective space, or we just lose energy, because we got to that place, we may think that things have ended or stopped. But the chart suggests that only the first act is over and a second act has begun with this new moon that certainly reaches a peak by June the 4th or June the 5th and continues on till the June 21st eclipse. The June 21st eclipse onwards, we are really dealing with wrapping up things that have been in place since the middle of July of 2018. Those are the last of the Cancer Capricorn eclipses. So we're getting a flavor right now of things that are going to be with us and at play starting the rest of this year, getting stronger at the end of this year, and certainly with us in play in 2021. Okay, because that's the first eclipse in a cycle, and the June 5th eclipse has a tendency to make its presence felt somehow in that way, announce things. And again, it is not all negative. So if some of my videos right now are not resonating with you and you are experiencing this time in a relatively positive manner, carry on. Keep on carrying on. The most notable thing about this new moon in Gemini today, no question, you guys know that new moons start a new lunar cycle. Those who've been watching this, 28 days. This is taking us to June the 21st. And the new moon cycle bears an imprint of the transits that are active at the time of the new moon. And things can start coming to you within 24 to 48 to 72 hours of the new moon, certainly the first week after a new moon, and between the new moon and the full moon, things escalate in energy and action and activity. So one of the things could be that if you feel like you've reached a certain conclusion or a coda prior to this new moon, a stabilization perhaps temporarily, a need to get steady, a need to get sober, a need to reflect, a need to be responsible, a need to be serious. Why is this new moon in Gemini, the astrology of it, suggesting that things are not done? And why is it suggesting that a certain amount of muckraking may continue on or may carry on? It might. And If you are not in a place where you're ready to initiate something like that, it could be that it is something that is brought to you within the next 24, 48, 72 hours, next week or so, okay? And there's a need to contend with it. What is creating this, what you cannot ignore if you were just to look at this new moon, is the fact that it is square Mars, and Mars is in Pisces. And somewhere, actions and activities that are being taken to address issues related to late 2015, 2016 that may have come up again in March and April of 2019 and February and March of 2020. Action, it is an opportunity to take action in those areas. I've already given my warning yesterday that if the action comes from a place of attack or defense, I've given the example of Mars not being able to shoot arrows in Piscean waters because the arrows have nowhere to go. But instead of shooting an arrow, someone may decide that they're going to bring out a submarine and shoot a torpedo. Just beware, because the time for directed, clean action that where the arrow can hit its mark is really much more in play after June the 29th. I'm going over yesterday's video to some extent. But with the Mars-Neptune conjunction and Mars and Neptune being in Pisces together and the conjunction getting stronger till the middle of June, there's a possibility of underhanded torpedoing. Mars is sextile Uranus. No matter what the warlike or the combat-like energy that is imprinting this new moon has an epiphanic quality to it. And there's a possibility that things will be revealed, that it will be transparent, that you may think that you are, whatever it is that you're doing is going to be visible, and I don't want to use the word felt, but it will be intuited, it will be clear. With Uranus, people reach quantum leaps of clarity. And the other thing, as I said, is you may think that there's something about that energy that is, you're better off looking at your to-do list, see where Pisces is in your chart, see what there's an opportunity to get done. As I said yesterday, start swimming in these Piscean waters slow and steady and get things knocked off on that list through a place of long-awaited execution related to this part of the chart. Whether we like it or not, the new moon square Mars invites conflict. The new moon in Gemini, which is inaugurating a period of communication and interaction and listening and talking and driving around your community or your neighborhood. A lot of what we're feeling is being felt personally and also on a macro level, okay? So this idea of conflicting, this idea of conflict, this idea of the new moon wanting to interact and be in communication, it could be through technology. The new moon is ruled by Mercury. Mercury is in Gemini. The new moon is in Gemini. Mercury is in the same sign in a planet, in a sign it rules. It is very, very strong right now. Mercury, before the new moon, met up with the retrograde Venus, which is busy doing its reevaluating thing. So the planet of communication has already interacted with the planet of reevaluating what is impeding natural flow and peace and harmony on a variety of levels and what we value. And they've already had the planet of communication has already given its download as part of this Venus retrograde process, okay? The planet of communication is strong and it is ruling this new moon, even though Mercury is going to go into Cancer in a week's time, but this is a new moon still of communication, writing, speaking, learning, interacting, driving, technology, the iPhone, the tablet, type, all that kind of stuff is still very, very active, and there's a need to continue to be in this reevaluation phase. The mystery is, what is Mars going to bring up? Where is there going to be a conflict in terms of reevaluating and trying to understand what we value and how to get to it and who's with us and who's not and what do I do and how do I do it and all that kind of stuff. And in comes Mars and is taking care of some things in this part of the chart that has to do with Pisces that somehow creates this conflict. The reason why I did not like my first video is because I was trying to avoid the conflict, and I don't think we have a choice. You have to embrace the conflict. The mystery in the few hours after the new moon would be, where's the conflict coming from? The chart suggests that someone somewhere is up to no good. And this energy is just going to escalate till the energy is going to escalate towards the middle of June. Now, Mars and Neptune coming together in Pisces that are having such a that are deadlocking the energy in Gemini, that are facing off with it. You know, the new moon in Gemini See where Gemini is in your chart? No question, the spirit of reevaluating relationships now gets an even greater infusion energetically, emotionally, intuitively, in a way that is going to color the next 28 days. So whatever work Venus has been doing starting April the 4th, but really more intensely since May the 13th, is going to take us to June the 21st, which makes total sense because then Venus goes direct on June the 25th. So this new moon is all about, all right, Venus, I am here to support you. Mercury, you rule me. Communication, we're going to be thinking, we're going to be processing, we're figuring this out. And somewhere this activity that is happening in this Piscean realm that is much more yang, much more action-oriented, could be clean and just the execution of certain tasks, but may have the urge to be in attack or defense mode. And because it is sitting there with Neptune and the Mars-Neptune conjunction gets stronger and stronger and stronger till the middle of June, it could be that some of it has an underhanded and deceitful quality. There's no other way for me to read this. There is one other way for me to read this. If you're pursuing something creative, if you have creative ideas, and particularly if they're Neptunianly tinged, music, fantasy, imagination, then the Mars-Neptune conjunction may be encouraging you to start to take action on something creative, something mystical, something spiritual, something fantastical. The other thing about Mars and Neptune, my God, I'm doing a Mars and Neptune video practically, is that it can lead to really intense sensual, sexual chemistry contact. You know, with I don't know how you're going to achieve that in the age of COVID, but you know, maybe by that time you will, or it's with whoever you're living with, or your partners, or your spouses, or your lovers, or whatever it is. I'm not getting into that. So there are non-conflicty, underhanded. And frankly, a fourth thing is that just some of the activities that you're taking care of that are reflected of taking action on issues pertaining to late 2015 and 2016 just have to do with you interacting with and dealing with and tackling issues that are related to the loss and spiritual growth and potentially the deception that has been part of that package all along. The murkiness, the mystery, the idea of what is not for you, and what you're holding on to, what is an attachment that, you know, things happening out of your control that are trying to get you to learn and move on, but are kind of a little bit painful and complicated to let go of, and are being achieved sometimes through Neptunian smoke and dagger means. Whatever it is, this new moon in Gemini, blocked by Mars, so the planet of action, energy, uncomfortable in Pisces, trying to swim, will most likely bring out the submarines and try to start shooting torpedoes because the arrows aren't working, especially as it heads towards Neptune, is challenging this new moon that I think in some ways is trying to achieve something constructive with the reevaluation of relationships. And it could very well be that my discomfort with this conflict in the first video, which is why I didn't like it, led me to get the epiphany you have to embrace the conflict. Some part of this reevaluating relationships is tied to this conflict becoming visible and clearer. Some part of this reevaluation of financial and relationship energy has to do with either the pursuit of creative and spiritual pursuits that are Neptunian, that have a heavy dose of imagination to them, or selfless service, or mysticism, or music, or fantasy, or imagination, or creativity. That could be one of them. So you're reevaluating creative endeavors, and somewhere you're removing obstacles. You're trying to integrate these two. You're trying to get a sense of what it is that's creating this deadlock and allow things to move freely, or else there's a reevaluation of financial and relationship matters through the lens of dealing with some form of deception or gaslighting. And as much as I am bewildered by, really, there's more coming up, there's more in the works, there's something happening, I thought we were done. You know, the second act is beginning, and something may be brought to you that has to be dealt with. Whatever is happening, depending on the part of the chart it is in, So if you have something like an Aries ascendant, it may be harder to see and it may be less visible. But with the Uranus sextile, there's something about it that still has kind of a, it's not quite as opaque as you might think it is, whether you're doing it or others are doing it, or however it is that is working out. So just have that knowledge as you're looking at this new moon video. I have a couple of more things to say, and I'm going to say them in a second. I'm going to do a separate video on Mars conjunct Neptune, even though I've covered a lot of it here. So just as a quick summary, new moon squares Mars, a retrograde Venus and Mercury that just met up a few hours before the new moon square Neptune. Mars and Neptune in Pisces, new moon, and Venus, Mercury, the ruler of this new moon, the ruler of the chart right now, communication, interaction, technology, writing, speaking, typing, all that kind of stuff, squaring each other. And as you get to the new full moon lunar eclipse in Sagittarius, Mars and Neptune will be within 5 degrees of one another, squaring the sun opposite the moon. You can't make this stuff up. Somewhere the conflict is there. It has to be embraced. It is not done, and it's going to have to be dealt with. And somewhere, as I said, if it's positive, somewhere all of this is not important because the eclipses are bringing something positive to you that you're working on. Go for it, deal with it. In the middle of it, past experiences, past people, past situations may come up for reevaluation, or whatever you're dealing with requires you to look at your finances. It could be that simple. Somewhere there are invitations perhaps, or an urge to, or invitation to start looking at and doing work that is more spiritual, mystical, that has been on the back burner, perhaps reevaluating what is blocking you from doing some creative work that might be close to your heart or might be worth exploring and experimenting with. And somewhere there's the question of reevaluating financial and relationship realities while no longer ignoring a certain amount of deceptive and gaslighting behavior that is very much in the works, very much in the works, no matter, and is intuitively, unmistakably revealed to you in eclipsy ways. Someone may be saying something, and through that process it becomes transparent what is actually going. Just stuff like that. That is why in yesterday's video I said be very careful of attack and defense and shooting arrows. The idea of shooting torpedoes is a little bit more appealing, but that's really something that Neptune does and not quite Mars. And I very nearly called this video Integrity, because God lives in the truth. It's that simple. And the truth will come out. And there will be consequences. And you can't always control those consequences. You may try to manage them, and you might try to pin people down. You might just the conflict. Remember one thing. Mars and Venus go together. And what is currently at work, the energy in the chart, because Mars is going to square Venus as we head to this full moon lunar eclipse in Sagittarius on June the 4th. And that is not an energy that is saying, that is a challenge to relationships. That is a challenge to relationships. So just be present. Be ready to process. Do not give up the reevaluation, relationships, and financial realities activity. Do not give up on it. And as much as in the first video I was trying to avoid or dissuade, people are going to do what they're going to do. We're all going to spend a certain amount of our tasks dealing with the sign of Pisces. That's where Mars is. That's where some of our energy is going to go. Whether Mars wants to swim or float or drown or whatever, or shoot torpedoes or shoot arrows or shoot rockets or whatever it is that it wants to do, whether it wants to hit certain targets and get certain things done, or whether it actually wants to go into attack or defense mode. Whatever those activities, it's windy, I'm watching the camera, I don't want it to flat, it is going to somehow come into deadlock and conflict with the reevaluation work that is trying to establish a certain sense of peace and harmony. They're not working together, they're working against each other, and they are working. I kept wanting to minimize the Pisces activity, and I cannot. You're going to have to embrace the conflict. And somewhere, integrity becomes essential. And somewhere, because Venus is retrograde and reevaluating things, and she, Even though she's not the strongest planet in the chart, that is the most important aspect in the chart. Because so much of what is happening in Gemini with this new moon is supporting this Venus retrograde. So to pursue Mars-like activity and to be male right now and go after what you want and go into attack or defense mode and only see the bullseye that you want to hit, it does not support the Venus reevaluation. It's not trine, it's not conjunct, it's 90 degrees. They're not working together. It's a deadlock. Now, one other important thing that is going on around this time that is not directly linked to these planets, and I have not spent much time talking about Capricorn and Cancer eclipses because I want to get done with videos on this Gemini Sagittarius subject, and we'll move on to those. But the fact that Jupiter has gone retrograde and Saturn has gone retrograde and Pluto is retrograde, but Jupiter and Pluto are going to meet up at the end of June being an important marker, is just a warning that this opening up that we're going through, that is very much on the cards in terms of starting the healing process related to COVID and starting some of the liberation related to COVID, particularly after April the 21st. The opening up concerns me a little bit. I am not a doctor. I'm not giving you medical advice. Please take that legal disclaimer. This is an astrology video. You are responsible for what you take from it and what you do in your actions. My concern as an astrologer looking at the chart, and that is what I'm communicating, is in this opening, we are revisiting expansion again. This expansion of Jupiter and Pluto, which expanded COVID in an unmistakable way, requiring the lockdowns, is happening again at the end of June in a more retrograde, let's review what's going on, let's meet up again kind of way. And my concern is some of this opening up may lead to an increase in numbers. So if you are vulnerable and feel like you absolutely need to avoid catching an infection, then I suggest, even as things are opening up, that you be careful and guarded more so than usual as you head towards the end of June. There's one more conjunction in November, so we're going to see how this is going to continue to roll out. But there's a reason why we're not being able to open up, and we are opening up, but we're opening up cautiously, and we don't know what that's going to do, and we haven't quite seen what that leads to yet. There's certainly a revisiting of things as we head to the end of June. So does that mean that in certain pockets there will be a certain amount of expansion that will teach us what else we need to do in order to contain what needs to be contained while the innovation continues that has been in place since this last new moon in Taurus that conjunct Uranus? Eclipses, we are now really in eclipse season, whether we like it or not. You know, June and July continues till August 20th. On the downside, I've talked about some of the positive that could be happening, changes, eclipsing people out of your life, eclipsing situations, people transitioning and passing on. All of that remains. All of that remains. If you like this video, found it useful, I'm so much happier with this video. It's more accepting of what the chart is saying. It's more realistic. Even if you feel right now that there is no conflict, and I've given you non-conflict examples, it's not done, guys. It's not done. It's not done. There's an Act 2 that goes from now, this new moon, till the next new moon, till June the 21st, and reaches some sort of a peak by June the 5th. It's only Act 2. It's not Act 3. Okay? But it is Act 2. And so something may happen in the next week or so that re-engages you in some sort of conflict, or re-engages you and motivates you to get certain things done, or re-engages and motivates you to get moving on those creative projects somehow. If there are people from the past that are coming back in your life, you may get clear reminders as to why it is that you stopped dealing with them in the first place. And they may be really, you know, it's this analogy of when the universe slaps you the first time, the second time you revisit something, it slaps you twice as hard. And so there is some of that going on, just in the spirit of Venus trying to figure out how to establish flow and abundance. I would say just try not to be too hasty, and try to really just check in with yourself and say, am I absolutely sure that this is going to lead to harmony? And I think the only person who can really answer that question with certainty are those who feel confident that they can control and manage things. But always remember, if you have that kind of strong Mars masculine presence in your chart, You can only control and manage so much. And for all of us, some of this is playing out on a macro level. Some of this is playing out on a macro level. The idea of gaslighty torpedo behavior and reevaluation and attempt for clear communication on a political level, on a social level. There's a conflict between people shooting torpedoes underwater and the planet of flow and abundance, reevaluating and seeing what she values and what we value, and how to reestablish financial flow and relationship flow and harmony on the planet. I mean, and thinking about it and communicating about it, and there's a deadlock somewhere. With Mars, you cannot ignore the red-hot angry planet, or the planet that goes after what it wants in an egoic and single-minded manner. You can't ignore it. And with Neptune, there's a sense of loss associated with it, and it can become deceptive. It's not as clean as Mars in Aries after June the 29th. It's just not. And somewhere, what Venus and Mercury are trying to do, strong and powerfully, it's a face-off. And I think we're all certainly feeling it on a political level. Even those people who, whether you're Republican or Democrat or liberal or conservative, there's just this element of feeling like somebody else is doing something underhanded while I am trying to understand what it is going on and how it is that flow can be established. Fascinating. If you like this video, find it useful, share it. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. Like the video by all means if you do. Click on the bell icon next to the subscribe button, because you'll be notified, and choose the appropriate selection when I do new videos. My contact information is in the subject area, and you can contact me for rates related to readings. You can contact me if you want me to make an easy to read version of your chart that tells you which signs are in which houses and what those houses stand for. Everybody pay attention, if you know what that is, to the signs of Gemini and Pisces. Gemini is where Venus is retrograding, the reevaluation is occurring, and the new moon happened, and the part of the chart is active for the next month, definitely, and extraordinarily active when it comes to the eclipse on June the 4th, June the 5th, and Pisces is where Mars and Neptune are, and a certain amount of our energy and action, our drive to achieve things, get things done, attack and defend is going to be taking place. However the conjunction with Neptune works out, whether it is artistic, creative, and constructive, or whether it is naughty. And that naughty can be read in multiple ways, as I have explained earlier in the video. In order for me to make an easy-to-read version of your birth chart, I'm going to need to know your birth time. Okay, so don't share that with me when you write to me first. Just inquire, get the information, and we'll take it from there. Over and out. The next video I'm going to do is about Mars conjunct Neptune, and I'm going to try and get the lunar eclipse video done sooner too, so we can move on to other subjects. This is too tense. All right, bye.